Let's get to our top story now. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam said she will withdraw the extradition bill that sparked citywide protests that have been paralyzing Hong Kong this summer. Withdrawing the bill satisfies one of 5 demands from the opposition. We're joined by today's panel to discuss Bruderman Asset Management Chief Market Strategist Oliver Pursche and Yahoo Finance's Scott Gamm. So this has been going back and forth. This is only one of the demands of the protesters, though, and one of the leaders has come out and said he's not necessarily confident that Lam is credible in even satisfying this demand.
She's done, right? And that's the whole problem, and it's been developing over the last decade in Hong Kong as a Chinese territory of, one nation, two systems. And that's the agreement that they made with the British when they took it over 15 years ago or so. The problem is really with Hong Kong, and it's good, and that's why markets are rallying. It was a question of how much muscle is China going to flex and what are the global implications, because if they flex their muscle here, they're likely to flex their muscle on trade and other items. And so this is why you're seeing a bit of a reprieve in the market today, but totally self-inflicted.
Self-inflicted, but in regards to Carrie Lam, doesn't this eventually undercut the protesters in Hong Kong and give everyone the deep breath and sigh of relief they need? Because this was the original issue that brought them to the streets.
Well, it seems like it's a sort of a win for the protesters, right? It's not a complete win, but I think the reason the markets have been caring about this is largely through the lens of the trade war between the U.S. and China. And now you have to wonder, from Xi Jinping's perspective, if the protesters were somewhat successful in Hong Kong, well, people in China, if they have gripes with the government, do they start protesting? And does that sort of put Xi Jinping in a worse position? So maybe all of this adds to the pressure that Xi Jinping will come to the table and negotiate with the U.S., because you have to wonder from his perspective, how many of these fires do you want to be dealing with at one time?
Right. There's also been a decent amount of discussion that Hong Kong is less important to China than it used to be. Beijing is now more important. But I do want to note that we've seen European luxury stocks, for example, also rallying today, because there's a direct benefit.
It's the market.
When the protests back off, you see here a number of them that have been rallying in the session because they have stores there that do pretty well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to the point, we have to understand who's protesting, and it's largely young people, right? That's the masses. And so I think from Xi Jinping's perspective, that once you have identified who's protesting, you can address that on mainland China much easier. So I'm not as concerned about that. To me, it was always about how does China react, and they've proven to be patient, and that was the right thing and the smart thing to do, given the conditions. The next phase, to your point, Adam, is there's 4 other demands. Oh. Do they let go?
But China patient and threatening, because they've said that they could intervene if necessary if this spiraled out of control. And when you focus on the U.S. China trade war, we still don't have a date for this meeting that's supposed to take place between the negotiators in the United States.
And we've talked about this before. My view, our view at Bruderman is that we're not going to see a trade deal until after the election. We think this is going to draw out. And I think that President Trump alluded to that when he yesterday tweeted and stated that, hey, if I win in 2020, things are going to get a lot tougher, so make a deal now. Because he's feeling the pressure on his people. He's feeling the pressure from the trade war. The economy is feeling the pressure. And so I think he realizes that, and he's trying kind of one last measure to bring them to the table.
You could argue some of the Democratic candidates might be even tougher than President Trump on trade. I mean, what if Elizabeth Warren wins the nomination or wins the presidency? Is China going to want to deal with her in negotiations?